Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we currently need to grab some technology here. Now we could make our way into like stability or general rocketry. Let's see, that gives us access to the Reliant hemispherical liquid fuel tanks, which is nice, and the T200, which will be a little bit more cost efficient. We can go ahead and grab that plus stability for right now, and now we can look to at least break the atmosphere, if not go into orbit. Let's see, we need to escape the atmosphere and orbit Kerbal. So that seems fine. Let's hop into the VAB. And in we go here. We're definitely going to need to open up, let's see, either of these would be fine, of course. We're going to have to modify this if we want to break the atmosphere or go into orbit. No doubt about that. The real question is, do we have access to a pod that we want? No. So we're going to have to do multiple flights here. That's not shocking. Let's ditch our flea, and we're going to put in the T200s. We're going to put in roughly a T800 equivalent, and then a second T800 equivalent, and then we're going to run like a T45. What's that looking like for thrust to weight? There we go. That is at 1.44. It's a little low on the thrust to weight. The Delta V is not really fantastic. This may barely squeak into orbit. Barely. And that's if we hit a fairly optimal launch. We could strap on some side boosters and make it a lot more likely to hit orbit. Actually, we definitely could with radial decouplers. Do we have access to struts at this point? We don't. So I think it's unlikely that we can get away with using these thumpers, because we have no way to stop them from wobbling around. We could maybe use hammers. That's a possibility. So we'd use like the TT-14s, perhaps. Put on a pair of these. This may also exceed some of our limits here. For right now, we don't have any problems there. Actually, no, that's going to be fine. So we could strap on a couple of SRBs out here. Something kind of like this. I'm a little concerned about potential tumbling happening, but I don't know that we have much right now for aerodynamic control surfaces. Yeah, these are only lifting surfaces, so that's not going to be too helpful. We don't have access at this point to fuel lines either. So the idea of like putting hemispherical fuel tanks here instead of aerodynamic nose cones is a cute one, but we're definitely not going to be able to get that fuel anywhere. So there's no point in doing that, and instead we're just going to put aerodynamic nose cones on here. Now the question is, how much waggling is actually going to happen here? We do need this to be grabbed roughly in the center, I believe. But let's move this down to about here. And if we fire this off, this is 2.12 thrust to weight. As it is right now, that's intriguing. And we do have the TD12 decoupler. So do we have access to the heat shield? We actually do. So we should make a couple of additional tweaks here. We should put in the 1.25 meter heat shield here. And then we should put in a TD12 decoupler right there. That puts us over our mass weight limit. And I think we were over that previously. Okay. And that's because of the weight of these hammers. So we might have to go with fleas instead. That does work. And of course, we want to have this be split off something like so. So that works. The fleas would be our initial takeoff. Okay. We should definitely get some aerodynamic nose cones on here if we can. There we go. So this should be reasonably functional. Now, this is not going to burn for very long, right? That'll just burn for 8.8 seconds. That's it. But that should be enough to get us off the ground. I'm going to thrust limit this down, though, and have it burn slightly longer and hit that 1.6 thrust to weight ratio. This is the number I like to be at. It's not really the end-all be-all. It's just the number I target. You can target higher, you can target slightly lower, but I prefer around 1.6 thrust to weight. So this thrust to weight will be slightly higher because we will be, at this point, 203 meters per second down the road, as it were. So that is theoretically viable. Now, do we have access to any drogue chutes? We do. Beautiful. And we can afford to have those on here. So let's just plop on a pair of drogue chutes like that. Cool. Now, we're going to be missing out on a lot of science because this is only a one-seater capsule at this point. I'm going to go ahead and save this as our first, like, orbital craft. And we will call this... Actually, I'm going to make a small change here. And that change that I'm going to make is I'm going to reattach this. I'm going to grab the heat shield. And I'm going to rotate that. Much better. Okay, now these are all aligned over here. Not that that's that important, but there we go. Perfect. So what are we going to call this? This is going to be our first craft that is going to attempt to break the atmosphere, and honestly, we may be able to get into orbit with it as well, just barely squeaking in. We do see that our thrust to weight dropped ever so slightly because of those parachutes. I'm going to raise that back up on this stage. We can't really raise it up over here unless if we were to put in a Reliant, and the thing about Reliants is they don't gimbal. So we're going to have no way to steer after our solid fuel boosters burn out if we go for the Reliant. That's obviously a terrible idea. There's one more thing that we could think about doing, and that is having some of this fuel, or potentially even having another stage be dedicated to... How many parts do we have available here? We've got 3 parts available. We can just squeak it in. So a TD12 decoupler here. I'm not sure what this is going to do to our weight. It might be too much. We just squeak in a pug there. Oh, wow. That just works. Fantastic. We're about 1 ton short. And our staging is messed up. But that's fine. So, for the moment, we are going to drop this engine here. And then this here. Like that. Cool. So, of course, we separate out our SRBs. And then we are going to drop off not this decoupler, I can tell you that. This decoupler here. And fire up our spatial engine there. So, our thrust to weight here is, of course, exceptionally low. But that's 649 delta V at sea level. 1427 in space. So, assuming that this gets us out of the atmosphere, we should very easily be able to orbit with this craft. Now, it's not the most efficient thing, that's for sure. But it squeezes into our constraints that we have right now, very nicely, in fact. There's no real constraint problems here at all, and apparently I named it a bunch of asterisks, because that happens to be my mute microphone button. Fantastic. And, oh boy, that's great. So, yeah, we have the exact number of parts that we can have. I don't think we're missing anything here. Yeah, I don't think we're missing anything. So we need to come up with what we want to name this. Well, this is Parallax Destinies, so maybe naming it after, like, famous figures from the Manifest Destiny period? That could get maybe a little cringe. I don't know. Manifest Destiny is already awkward enough. Let's just name it... We could just name it after, like, famous explorers. That's kind of something that happens in reality. I don't know. I'm always bad at naming things. Let's just call it Untitled Spacecraft, and we'll come up with a name later. Also, I'm noticing this is not flickering. Was that only flickering on the pad where it was Z-fighting? I don't know. Let's put it out on the pad, and let's see what happens. In the meantime, I'll be trying to think up a name theming scheme for our crafts. But for now, this will do. I usually go with, like, very utilitarian names, and it's not very, like, NASA-ish, I guess I would say. So my question right now is, how much wobble do we have here? And how are we actually going to end up doing for steering in the atmosphere? Those are my 2 primary questions here. But let's see how we go. You ready, Jeb? Jeb is ready. So let's do this. Cool. We're just going to burn straight up for the time being with the SRBs. The moment those burn out, we'll fire up this engine and detach them. Helps if I throttle up. And now we're going to start our turn. I can see that we pulled off of our heading slightly. We're not going very fast. There's no doubt about that. How much burn time do we have in this? Almost 2 minutes of burn. Yeah, those crashed down on the pad. Hilarious. For the moment, I just want to be chilling about here. I'm concerned about these aerodynamics. But I'm just trying to stick with the prograde. For the moment. We're pretty low, and we're pretty slow. Well, actually, we're getting some decent speed going here. But we're definitely pretty low. We don't have any idea of what our overall apoapsis is. That's for sure. I want more vertical height here. Like more altitude. So I'm going to hold here for the moment. We can see we're having some aerodynamic effects, and I don't love that. Okay. We're definitely accelerating a lot, and that's good. I'm going to head back over to the prograde marker. We really do need to grab, well, all of this stuff. And we're pretty low still. That's for sure. Like, there's a lot of aerodynamic problems here. So we took too aggressive of a gravity turn. There's no doubt about that. Okay. For the moment, we're just going to hold here. And we're going to see how high up we end up getting. I'm also going to collect all of our experiments here. Okay, 40 kilometers. We're still going up at a decent clip. At this point, let's burn. I'm going to head directly to the horizon. I have no idea what our final apoapsis is. I'm hoping it's enough. We'll see. We will see. Okay, so our thrust to weight is not too bad. We're burning in atmosphere, which of course isn't ideal, but I think we're going to make it to orbit on our first real attempt. That's good. I would definitely take a slightly more vertical approach to this in the future, but it sure looks like we're going to make it to me. Or very close to it. Okay, we're now officially in space. Crew report, temperature scan, atmospheric pressure scan. Now we're not going to be able to get these. We can't reset those, but that's okay. Looking at this, we've got a ways to go until our apoapsis. So we want to wait until we're around here to continue our burn. So I'm just going to hold here for the moment. It looks like we've overshot by a pretty decent margin. That's not shocking, considering that we don't have any sort of indicators of our trajectory at this point other than this line. So we're going to want to burn around here to make our way into orbit most efficiently. Looks good. We broke an altitude record. We've reached space. We escaped the atmosphere. Cool. So that is all absolutely great. How are we doing on power? Okay. We're doing okay. So at this point, we want to warp for a little bit. Until we note that this is getting very close to dropping down. We've definitely overshot a bit, but that's not shocking. 128, 129, 130. It's slowing down. is definitely slowing down. Let's go ahead and begin our horizontal burn here. Cool. I don't think this is exactly where we want to do the burn, but it's probably close enough. And we've got a good amount of fuel left for it. Okay. There we go. We have entered orbit. Beautiful. And technically we have enough here that we might be able to do like... It'd be close to being able to get like a moon flyby or something, but that's not the goal here right now. Right now we're just simply going to turn around. We've got a bunch of in-space nears here, but we can't do like EVA reports. That said, we could hop back to the Space Center, and this is a little bit weird that you can do this, but we can hop back to the Space Center, upgrade our astronaut complex right now, and that will allow us to do EVA reports. That'll get us a lot more science. So that'll be good, in theory. Okay, so our astronaut complex here. Kerbals can perform EVAs by doing this. Done. Let's hop back into the tracking station, and we're going to go to... There's literally no name. I love it. Cool. So now we should be able to do EVAs. And we'll just go to like this terminator here. So that sounds good. We do want to stop time warp. Jeb is going to EVA, and we will collect that. So now we're just going to time warp around a bit and collect what EVA reports we can. Oh, that was grasslands there? I missed that one. We should get grasslands again, though. Oh, and I want to... Let's see, we have SAS off. We should not be using any electric charge right now. Correct. That was our first spacewalk. Grasslands. Cool. So we'll grab that and store that up here. What else do we get from this orbit? Highlands. Cool. And we are seeing that Z fighting there, sadly. What else do we see? Mountains. Fantastic. That's another 8 science. Anything else up over this way? Water, shores. We're just going to the next terminator. I think this is probably... Oh, there's a deserts. We'll grab that. Excellent. What else do we have? Hello, Moon. We're going to be there soon. But we're not quite there yet. This orbit is going to get us so much science. Okay, here we come up on the Terminator. And that's all that we're going to get right now. So, at this point, we can go ahead and warp around to about here. I'm thinking about here-ish. We don't have access to maneuvers or any sort of information of any sort, but that's okay. So at this point, we're just going to position retrograde, and we're going to eyeball this. Something about like that. That should bring us down relatively safely. And now we can warp our way on over. Now, Jeb is not skilled enough to hold retrograde here. So that's going to be a little bit spicy for sure. But we are not going to be coming back up. Okay, I don't want to be facing the wrong direction here. So before we hit the atmosphere, we're going to flip over to retrograde. And we do have a decent amount of fuel left. I'd like to recover as much of this as we can. So I'd like to not jettison the second stage if we can get away with that. So that means that we would do this, and we should also have our drogue chutes on a separate stage. Let's just go ahead and do that for now. Cool. We're not in app mode just yet, but we will be very, very shortly. So let's bring this on down. Cool. Flying high, and we're not going to grab that EVA report. I say as we grab the EVA report. Okay, perfect. Flying high is always precarious. Okay, we're going to turn SAS on, and we're just going to try to hold here. So we're going to bleed off as much energy as we can here, as much of our like velocity and potential energy that we have. We're going to bleed off as much of that as we can via aerobraking. And then when I feel like that's becoming less viable, we're going to burn the rest of this fuel. Now, this fuel is getting less efficient to burn the further into the atmosphere we go. Understood. That's completely fine. And not all that relevant either. So you can see we're still accelerating here. And that's reasonably to be expected, but we're bleeding off speed over this way. So our altitude here is dropping. Cool. I don't like the fact that we are still accelerating. Are we impacting the ground at this point? We are not. Okay, so that seems reasonably fine. And we are starting to see some atmospheric effects here. So at this point, we're going to burn off a bunch of this fuel. Maybe not all of it. But I'd like to bleed off quite a lot of speed here. Because we are now looking at impacting the ground somewhere over this way. And we're going to need to cut our speed by a pretty decent chunk before that happens. So we're going to bleed off around, well, down to about 100 meters per second left here. Now, I'm actually going to go to like 10 seconds of burn time rather than meters per second, because that's a constantly changing target because of the atmospheric pressure, but that'll be fine. So we've got about 10 seconds of burn left here. We are down below 2 kilometers per second. Okay, so there's that burn complete. And you can see now we are still accelerating, but we did bleed off around 600 meters per second, which is nice. Okay. I hope to see us decelerate soon. We're pretty low to still be accelerating here. We may have to bleed off the remainder of this fuel. But there was that re-entry burn there. Only 1,700 surface meters per second. It's not too bad. Okay, we are seeing a heating bar here. And now we're starting to slow back down. Cool. We're also starting to tumble a little bit here. And I'm going to slow us down. Burning off the remainder of this fuel. Okay. That tumble is a bit spicy. I told that to decouple. I'm not sure what was going on with that, but sure. Had to manually decouple that one. Okay, now we should be fine. SAS off. And drogue shoots out. That was a bit spicy, I'm not gonna lie. But honestly, for a first flight, not too bad. For a first orbital flight with this level of tech. I like it. So at this point, we can physics warp. And we'll just head on down through the clouds. We'll grab this EVA report as soon as we can, but we don't want to grab that right now. What with us moving at this speed. So there's our drogue chutes popping out there. Fantastic. And our main will be in a moment. There's the main. Cool. So at this point, we're moving slow enough that we can EVA report with our flying low. And now we can time warp down to the water. Beautiful. Okay, so let's splash on down here. And that was a very successful first real flight. I like it. That was absolutely great. We're going to get a lot of science from that. And here comes our splashdown. Perfect. Nothing really to be done here. We can't reset our Mystery Crew observation material study. We'll get back to those. But we will go ahead and recover that vessel. And let's see how much science we got. Spending that science is probably a job for next episode, but that's completely okay. So what did we get? Obviously, we finished up multiple contracts, and we'll have to figure out what contracts we want to do next. But for now, this will do. Any moment now, KSB, you can do it. I have faith. It'd be very awkward if it crashed right now, but I don't think it will. It shouldn't, anyway. Cool. So 150 science from that. Beautiful. And with that, it is time to put a cut in here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And next episode, we are going to continue working on our science. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including Casserole. Wow, my notepad opened on the wrong monitor. Exciting. Casserole, JJ Gamer, ALS Gamer, Kentuin, Atala, Shadow Wolf, Jens Graham, Spartan News, Nick Smarty, Video Games Are Not Real, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Kadra, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video. And as always, I will see you all next time.